Hey there, everybody. TJ with ShopBot Tools, and today we're going to talk about drawing text. So, a lot of different ShopBot projects involve using text in some form or another. I talked to several different ShopBotters and sign makers and asked them for their top tips for putting together this tutorial. So, let's look at different types of text: true type versus single line. Let's do text on curves, adding fonts to the software if it doesn't already exist, distorting the text, raised text versus V-Carve text. So let's go ahead and get this started. So let's start out by looking at the two different types of text that we would be creating. And when I'm talking about different types, right here underneath the draw text command, you have right here a true type or a single line, and that's exactly what I've created here using Times New Roman, which is a font that is already installed on this computer. We use a true type. Down here for where it says single line, I've switched it over to the single line. So again, whatever fonts are on that computer that are that type of font, which are a single line in that case. So again, you go through here and size these and anchor them the same, but you pick the type, whether a true type here where you see it is more what users would be using for a V-Carve, where the single line font is going to have either one single line or a series of single lines. And you'll see the difference in these when you come over here to actually toolpath. Uh, the TrueType font is typically used with a V-Carve toolpath, where the single line is typically used with a profile or an engraving toolpath. So this one here, for the single line, was used with the engraving toolpath, where I set it with the same V bit as used above, but it has a depth set to it, which would be the same if it was a profile on the line with that same depth right there of the 0.125. TrueType typically uses a V-Carve toolpath where you don't actually set a cut depth, because the V-Carve engraving toolpath, what's neat about it is it mates the geometry of the bit, in this case a V90, with the width of the font. So this being the Times New Roman that you saw, there's different parts of the text or the font that is wider than others. So this all comes down to personal preference of what it is that you want it to look. So whether you're using a true type or a single line, it is what you want your project to look like. And in this case here, I just want to point out that a V-Carve engraving toolpath used on a true type has different depth levels. You can see on the T here, this where the font is narrower, it doesn't go as deep. Where it widens, it gets deeper. And I just want to also point out too that you can see if I go back here up to my straight up and down Z view, and I hover my mouse cursor here, I can see that the tip of my mouse cursor, when I go over the different depths of my text, down here in the bottom right corner, you can see that right now there's nothing there, but look where my arrow is as I hover over the text, and you can see the actual depth of your cut in the V-Carve. So this one here, you can see the different depths of the P, how deep it gets, so you can see if it's going to be too close to your material thickness. We're down here underneath single line, and I zoom over these, I know that when I hover over the very bottom of it, it's not going to ever get deeper than 0.125, because that is what I had set for a depth. So again, it's personal preference here. I just wanted you to point out before you get going and creating your text, and you go through and create something and you apply the toolpath to it, that you're getting the results that you want. So just remember, with text creation, you have true type or single line, and depending on which one of those you grab will also vary for which one you may want to use when you're doing your tool pathing. So there's going to come a time where you're looking through your different fonts on your Vectric software and say, hey, yeah, I don't have the font that I'm looking for. The fonts that are showing up through that software are fonts that are installed on your PC. So for me, here's an example. I wanted to make a sign for my house that had my kids' names, mommy and daddy, to hang up, and I wanted to use the Scrabble tile. So I went to my favorite search engine. I typed in Scrabble font. It brought up the font that I needed. This here case, it was called the Tiles font. It's a true type font. I downloaded it. Please check anything that you download for permissions and what you can and cannot do with that font. This is just an specific example for one sign that I made to hang up here in my house, but check those stuff. I installed this. Once I get done installing it, make sure all versions of your software are closed, and then when you open up a fresh new version, what will happen is over here on the text function, when you bring it down, that font will show up. So, I did the Tiles one, so that showed up there. Other ones that I've done over the years were, Toy Train and different ones for making things. So look at the permissions, but what you're doing is you're downloading off the internet a font, and there's a lot of different websites out there that have good fonts that you can download. And once you've downloaded that, again, close out all current versions of the software, open them back up. That will show up here. You can create the text, draw your text, make your sign, and sometimes just adding in the font that it is that you're looking for saves you a lot of work for you trying to draw that from scratch. So that's if you're starting to watch this tutorial and see that it's going a little too fast or above your level for drawing text, I would recommend coming up here to help, checking out the video tutorial browser. That's going to bring up the Vectrix video tutorial browser that goes with it. And if you scroll down, you'll find the one called Text Creation Guide, which takes you a little bit back further than where we are, which is going to be stepping back into actually creating the text and going into a little bit more specific detail of some of these icons. So these are exactly what they say they are. And if I click on my option here, which is the ABC over the text, I can hold the shift key down, select my arc, and again, this is up to the designer here to figure out the way they want this, if they want to maintain text size or if they want to scale it to fit the curve. Same thing down here along a curve or an arc. Again, all up to you and how you want it to look. What I'm pointing out with these two options here are when you have a nice clean arc like this, it's not a big deal to have the text spacing. Where down here along the curve, things can get squished together or really brought far apart. And I just want to point out that when you have these that are overlapped like this, and you click up here where it has the edit text spacing and curve, it does bring this over. When I hover over this, it shows me I have the less than keys. So if I had up here where the A and the L, I want these closer together. Every time I click, it does bring them together. Or if I wanted to shift these apart, if I hold the shift key down, it takes those from the less than to the greater than, and now when I click. Sometimes you're going to have a lot of clicking if things are really scrunched together. So you can hold another key down with the shift key, and that's the control key, and that allows you to do what I like to call a mega shift, which is also just equivalent of about 10 clicks together. So instead of you doing lots of clicks, unless you really need the therapeutic portion of that, you can hold the control key down with the shift key. Or if you only need to do a couple clicks, just hold the shift key down, and this lets you do one at a time. But in between here where I have a long and curve, I'm going to hold the shift key down, and instead of lots of clicks, I'll bring the control key in as well, and it clicks it and shifts that apart a lot faster. So just remember, when you're using text spacing and curves, you can hold the shift key down to shift things apart, and the control key allows you to do multiple clicks with one. And just remember too, when you're trying to do curving, that the text on a curve says a single line of text. And back here too, when we're in edit text spacing and curve, we're still limited to curving only single lines of text, but you can edit the text spacing between lines. So if you do have multiple lines and you want to bring them apart, if you hover between them, it does allow you to shrink the line, or again space it out depending on where you be careful where you hover. You see I keep clicking in between, so make sure you do that. And then also to remember that you have the option, when you get done with spacing, you can also distort objects. So you have here distort selected objects, and you can do some fun stuff with text depending on if you want to do it on curves or just a bounding box. You can simply, with a bounding box, do a little bit of node editing fun here and allow you to distort your font doing that as well. So text spacing, distorting, get creative with this. And people that have worked with script font will notice too that you do have a little bit of an overlap between certain letters, or you have letters that aren't quite attached. So something I like to do whenever I bring in a script font, since it is all grouped together, the first thing I'll do is convert it to curves. And I would go through all my different letters here and bring them together, where I want them overlapped at all. And I see how I'm just using my arrow keys on my keyboard if I needed to bring any together or move them apart any bit more. I like to make sure that I've got both tips of the letter through. It'll just make a cleaner transition when I do my next function. And what I'm going to do here is do a select all, but what I want to make sure is any insides of letters, like inside these L's here or inside the A or G, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to join everything and bring it together. So you can see here what I'm looking to do is use my weld function, and when I weld these together, see how it got rid of any place that I had overlaps. What would have happened if I would have had these inside ones selected, as they would have deleted, and you can see that right here with the A. So I would just edit, undo this, and hold my shift key down to deselect my A, and again redo that. So that's what you're looking to do. Again, you're going through and making sure, look, my Y here, my Y that, and that's why you'll also check in the 3D preview mode until you get it just right. So when you have a lot of text, yep, sometimes it's a little bit of going back and forth and making sure that you've got the ins and outs. But again, I want to zoom in here and make sure I'm pointing out what I'm doing with this function is any place where I have an overlap, which when I get into what I would be doing next is tool pathing. To get a cleaner tool path, what I'm going to do is actually weld those together. And when you do this, you may not get the smooth transition in between some of your letters, and that's where you could use your node editing and come in if you wanted to smooth these out. And to save myself the time from node editing, that's where I've used my arrow keys ahead of time and moved these letters to exactly where I want them to make sure I get a good transition. Well, let's get done with the drawing side and switch over here to tool pathing, because there's a lot more over here on this side that we need to look into. And the first one is V-carving. So a lot of people love the look of the V-carve. Different fonts give you a lot of different looks. And I just want to point out, when I go in here and do the V-carve engraving tool path, I like to leave it with a 0, 0 start depth. The only time I ever really need to do a start depth is if I'm cutting down inside of an existing pocket, or my font is a very narrow font and I want it to have a little bit deeper of a look, so I might give this a 0.01 or 0.02. But for the most part, this is something we leave at 0, 0. And we'll continue along here and go and select our bit. Now, something that I've done in my tool database is I've actually created a set of 3D bits. Now, I don't do a lot of different types, so I just have a 60 degree and a 90 degree, which are just copies from my other starter set bits. It's the same bit, so I've grabbed the geometry and everything just by copying that bit and pasting it down here under V-carve. But what I have done for both my 60 degree and my 90 degree is I have went in here and I've changed my feed rate and my plunge rate to be the same number. Now, these ones here that you're seeing on the screen are pretty fast. So I've got these designed in toolpath, and feeds and speed have been checked for a PRS alpha machine. So if you're using a standard, or you say you have a desktop or a router, you're going to want to slow these down to say 2 inches or so for a second. But yep, the key that I have for this example is my feed rate and my plunge rate are the same. So just whatever it is that you're using for your machine, you want your feed rate and your plunge rate to be the same. So feed rate and plunge rate is pretty intense. Again, these are set up for a PRS alpha machine. And if you want to get into feeds and speeds for your machine, that's a different tutorial to check into. So the key of that was, again, feed rate, plunge rate are the same. I've grabbed my tool. My tool was my V90. I've grabbed my text, and this is my V-Carve with a V90. So when I hit calculate here, I can see that this looks like down there, V-Carve with a V90 bit. From here, I'm going to go back to my top left corner, switch back to 2D view, come back over here to the right side of the screen and click close. Now down here to look at doing raised text, to raise the text, you need a border to raise it around. So in this case, I'm going to select this rectangle by holding the shift key down, and what I'm going to do for a raised text is use a pocket toolpath. So in this case here, I need to do my cut depth. Again, start depth is 0, 0, and how deep do I want this to be? I'd like a 1/4 of an inch cut depth. And for this one right now, I'm going to turn off my advanced, and I'm just going to set this up using a 1/8 of an inch end mill from my starter set. I will grab my 1/8 of an inch out of my desktop starter set. I have it set up here to use an 1/8 of an inch end mill underneath wood. And I'm going to, with this, just verify that I have my text selected, the rectangle, or in any case vector that you want to raise it to, and you can get here into your different directions for clearance for the material that you're working with. And I'll hit create and calculate, and in this case here now, if I preview that toolpath, what you're seeing it happen is it's going around doing its different depths, and it has now created the raised text. So yes, if we want to switch back here from solid color to the wood, we can see it a little bit better. You can see now that we have raised text. So by clicking the font of the text, that vector, and the border that we wanted to raise it to. But what we have also done in this case is we've gotten rid of where it says V-Carve. We've pocketed all of that away because we pocketed away that surface so this text could get raised. So to fix the V-Carve, let's first go back by naming what this was, so it'll help us with clarifying. This was a pocket of 0.25. Calculate. And we don't need to see it again since it's already been done. We'll close this out. But we know our pocket was down 0.25. So what if we go back to our V-Carve here and do a start depth of 0.25 and hit calculate there. So now it's going to take that toolpath and it's going to start it down inside of our material off our surface 0.25. So when I preview this toolpath, you can see that it goes down inside there. So now we're back to seeing what it looks like preview down. And again, sorry, go back here to my material color, and you can see that it's down in there. Now just remember, things may look great here in preview mode, but you have to start thinking like the CNC machine here. So that ShopBot is going to do exactly what you tell it to do. And when you hit close here and you go over here and you click on this and you go to save this, what's it doing first? It's doing the V90 first. So if I was to go back to preview mode, you would see what's going on by resetting the preview. Without that pocket, that V-Carve is going to jam not only down through the 0.25 to get to where it needs to cut, it's going to make a lot of noise, and it could get so deep that it burns your material, gets up into where your collet and your collet nut are, and it could be a real mess out on your ShopBot. So you have to think about this in the order of the cut. This pocket should be done first before that. So if I reset this here, you can see the actual pocketing is done first. Then you do your bit change and do your actual V-Carve next. Since this is all cleared away, it's safe now to put that V90 bit down onto that surface and carve that out. And what a lot of us are starting to see who cut a lot on our machines is this pocket using that little eighth of an inch bit, eighth inch straight bit. It's going to take 3 hours and 23 minutes to cut that out. So that's a long time for a little sign like this. So one last thing that would be added to this sign here, underneath this pocket, we would actually switch out of simple mode and go to our advanced mode, because what's really nice feature that's built into the software is we have a large area clearance tool that we can use. So this eighth of an inch bit that would be doing all of these passes that we see, especially out here in the field where there's nothing but a flat surface, we really only need that eighth of an inch down inside these letters where it's really decorative. So this large area clearance tool, by hitting select, grabbing a large bit, say like a ½ inch straight bit, now allows me to use this big bit at one pass out here in the field, and then the eighth inch pass to come in and do the detail. And when I calculate this one out, it goes back into preview, look what it did with all these lines. It really spaced them out because the ½ inch bit is covering a lot more ground. And what's nice about the software is it also added in a clearance toolpath to go alongside of the detailed bit. So you can rename these if you want, which will help you. And again, you're going to get the same results. It's going to look exactly the same when I hit reset and preview. It looks no different than it did before, as far as you're using a ½ inch bit, then switching to an eighth inch bit, and then switching finally to your V-Carve bit. Same exact results, but overall time-wise, I'm down to 41 minutes instead of the couple hours that it was beforehand. So we've taken this sign through a lot of different steps right here. We've sure covered a lot of information in this tutorial about drawing text. So please take some time, practice in the software, make some projects, and see how this works for you. As you have questions and keep moving on to other things, always feel free to check out our website where we have a very active ShopBot forum that you can visit. And also check out our training page where you can see trainings that are here in Durham, North Carolina, trainings around the country, and other trainings like this that are recorded and put on our training tutorial webpage. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.